From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Well, it seems that Western Digital lost my books. We have a number of stories here going on this week. We've got a story about the United States states are considering outlawing ransomware payments. Data from LinkedIn is disappearing, and a whole bunch of other things happening that are just one of the normal ways of the week. We have these stories coming to you every week on Cybersecurity Headlines, and today we are going to have a chance to get some insight, some experience, and some expertise from our guest, who this week is Gerhard Rickert. He is the VP of Information Security at Central Pacific Bank. So I want to welcome Gerhard to the show. Gerhard, welcome.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to see you, and we are just going into a whole collection of stories here that are making waves this week. I just want to remind everybody that our sponsor for this week is Kiavi, and I'll be speaking about them a little bit later on as well. And if you are joining us live, please feel free to join us as well on Crowdcast and send us your comments. We'd love to get some comments and see what people are thinking about as we go through the show. So we have just 20 minutes to go through a number of really interesting things going on. And number one is a little lighter than usual, perhaps, but in the UK, houses are being sold, obviously, as they are everywhere, but fast, reliable broadband is becoming now a key selling point for UK house hunters. Purple Bricks found that 41% of potential buyers in the UK now place speed of broadband internet connectivity as a top priority when they're buying a home, which is more valuable to them now than perhaps proximity to schools, transit, stores, and restaurants. This looks like another indicator of growing interest in the working from home area. With even telecoms joining the telecom companies joining the sales negotiation process. Now, I understand, Gerhard, that you have some unique insight on this, having spent some time in Japan. So what's your comparison between how things were going there compared to what we're seeing in the UK and in the US?
Well, it's nice to see that the UK and the US is catching up. Japan, for the longest time, had fiber to their homes, all apartments, at about $60 a month. So it's really nice to see, especially with the work from home issues going on. I think it's going to be a very important factor.
I would agree. I think we're seeing, as we're coming out of the lockdown, more and more people are looking to do this at least part of the time, if not all of the time. Now, if in your position, in terms of being a senior officer in cybersecurity, do you see this as something that is viable? Could you have some of your team working from home some of the time or all of the time? Can we go this route?
We do. Hawaii has a very interesting outlook on the pandemic, so we tend to work from home. Most work from home. I work from the office, as you can see behind me.
I love it.
But but we do allow our employees to work from home, and we try, and if they're up for it, we try to get them to come in, maybe once a week, just for some FaceTime and interaction.
Yeah, so a combination. But I mean, it's just so great to hear you were doing this, it is working, and that's a kind of proof of concept in terms of the work from home environment that I think people may want to see, because it's, as you said, Japan has been doing this for a long time, and it does seem to be a serious issue both from the employment side and also from the management side as to whether this can be done. So I'm delighted to see that it was working for you. So
Yes.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, continue.
Well, no.
Okay,
Please
so
continue.
we got, as the next story, I wanted to move across to stateside, let's say, and we've got a number of states that are considering outlawing ransomware payments. Now, this is an issue, again, we've been covering this for quite a while, and ransomware comes and goes, it gets bigger and larger, and the cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated in setting up the ransomware in terms of what insurance companies will pay. Last week, we spoke about how it can actually become tax deductible, so it becomes a whole corporate thing. So,
Yeah,
North Carolina, Texas, they're all considering now, and New York and Pennsylvania, considering bills that would put legal barriers in the way of paying ransoms, whether it's public money or private money. They're all over the map in terms of how they want to do this. But what do you think about this in terms of step forward? There's an interesting distinction between just barring public funds versus barring private corporate funds. Do you think this will work, or do you think this is just small steps in an escalating battle with the cyber criminals?
I mean, the biggest risk is if you pay the ransom, do you get the proper key, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what this is actually a very interesting question because what I've been working on lately was the to ransomware. And with people, are you able to see me? I seen some drop here. Can you hear me? See me?
I can still hear you, so please continue on. I can still hear what you're saying. You're
Okay.
coming back.
So with what we've seen, and it's out in the news with this one particular person that was approached by these ransomware gangs that said, "Hey, click this, we'll give you a whole bunch of money," and the guy went ahead and clicked it. Now, the guy, did they pay him? No. Is he going to go to the police department and say, "Hey, I talked to this group and they made me, act up on ransomware in the company and they didn't pay me"? He can't do that, right? And then that person, it's a vicious cycle because he gets blackmailed at every company that he goes to. So that's one thing that kind of keeps me up at night. The second thing is if you pay the ransom, are you 100% sure that you're going to get your data?
Right.
Um, that have paid some hefty numbers and have not gotten their data back. So uh, is it for the government to step in and decide who can get paid and who can't, or if people, if they outlaw it? That's not for me to answer on that side, but that's it's going to be, I don't mean to be shadowy about this question, but that's going to be an interesting journey down the American lawmakers road.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of people debating this back and forth, and a lot of policies being made. But we've heard experts say this is the cost of doing business, and others will say you should never pay the ransom, and others saying it's idiotic to say don't pay the ransom. So it's an ongoing battle. It's one of these stories that keeps on going as it becomes, as we've seen, 65,000 ransomware events last year, one 7 every hour, I think it was, just outrageous
Yeah.
numbers. But let's move along to
Mhm.
a story of loss, if you'd like, in terms of Western Digital. They create a network-based storage system that lost petabytes of data from users, writers, people just storing data on there. And it's been determined that this was done by sort of an erroneous action on the part of a programmer at Western Digital, that their MyBook Live storage devices, the piece of code that actually forced people to deliver a password was actively removed, accidentally it seems. But this seems like one of these very sad stories of perhaps an accident. In terms of how people build quality assurance into their products, do you have any sort of insight into this? How do people make sure that this kind of mistake is not made before it's sent out into the wild?
This is your software development lifecycle, right? Getting
Yeah.
cybersecurity involved and compliance and whatnot involved in the whole life cycle of what you're doing, so that you can catch these issues, quick. And I just think this was a failure on maybe Western Digital's side to, it's a learning moment for them now, right? I'm sure they're going to start, bolstering their compliance against code that gets pushed up.
Absolutely. I mean, you're quite right. This is just a classic notion of just writing code, testing it, and making sure it's safe before it goes out. But when we run these stories also, we want to look for follow-up stories as to what happened. But in this case,
Mhm.
it may be that information data was actually just erased accidentally. But the point being that there was a lot of valuable data that has apparently been permanently lost. So there is a significant, tragic end to this in terms of not being able to get this
And
data
we're
back.
talking petabytes at a time, right?
Yeah,
So
huge.
it's
Yeah.
it's I know that HD Moore from Rumble, he made a couple. He did say it's like they intentionally enabled the bypass, which, if you look at it, I mean, can you not agree?
How did this happen? How did this happen?
Exactly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's just take a moment here to acknowledge our sponsor for this week. Our sponsor for this week is Kiavi. If you are worried about being the next ransomware victim like Colonial Pipeline, well, remember that cyber criminals stole gigabytes of data before their first extortion attempt. And their extortion attempt was demanding payment to decrypt Colonial's information. Despite a multi-million-dollar ransom payment, the pipeline's stolen data is in the hands of these attackers forever. So if you head over to kiavi.com sessions, you can learn more about an amazing way that they have for protecting data from extortion attempts. It truly is quite fascinating. So check them out at kiavi.com/sessions. So we're back here. We're doing fantastically here with these stories, and they're fascinating. And I got to say that your background and experience are really amazing. So here's one that seems, again, like a repeating story in a way, but LinkedIn is in the news again this week. And in this case, they're dealing with another story. They had about 500 million pieces of data lost back in April, and now 700 million pieces of data are now available for sale online. Now, the issue here, of course, is that this was on a hacker forum, but according to LinkedIn, there was no breach. This wasn't a breach. This is just simply scraped data. So it's not quite the same thing, but the point is that this information is still out there. It is still available for identity theft and spam and brute force attacks and social engineering. So is this something, again, that we can just get used to as the way of life? Or, what can we do to remove the complacency amongst the end users about losing their data this way?
Well, I think you're right. The world is pretty complacent because it's happening after what day after day after day, and now you're starting to see cybersecurity issues all over the place. So it all goes down to, this is all publicly scraped data from LinkedIn. So whatever you don't want about yourself out there, don't put it out there. If you go on LinkedIn and you share a whole bunch of stuff on LinkedIn, well, guess what? It'll probably get mined and scraped. And I mean, I kind of feel proud that my data is kind of for sale out there. It's
okay, yeah, so I mean,
public data about me. Sure, yeah, I got some market value there. But no, I think people should really take the time, look at their social media, understand what they do and what they don't want out in public forum. You post on social media what you want the world to know. So yeah,
it seems to be a long tail story to get people to become cyber literate to the point of, let's say, active password management. And again, just the defense of the data. And the question I'd want to send out as a poll of the day would be, how many people, upon reading the LinkedIn story, went and changed their password at LinkedIn? Not necessarily because that was the cause of the problem, but because, once again, it should become one of these actions. It becomes almost the norm to change this, the same way you put out your garbage once a week. You do these things to keep things safe, and it shouldn't be an issue. But this allows us to segue into the next story, which is that American House lawmakers have introduced the American Cybersecurity Literacy Act to help mitigate cyber risks. Now, this is a bipartisan group of representatives, not a word you hear a lot right now, introducing legislation that mandates the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to set up a cyber literacy campaign to bring awareness about online security and prevention of cyber attacks. Some of the stuff included here is how to detect phishing emails, the importance of strong passwords, MFA, and just risks associated with the public internet. Now, for most people watching or listening to this, and yourself and myself as well, this is kind of cybersecurity 101. Do you think that this has value? Do you think people are going to pick up on this because it is a government mandate? Or do you think this is going to be like Patch Tuesday, which has the reverse danger of revealing where the weaknesses are to the bad guys who are watching? Is this a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. This is a good thing. The more education and the more knowledge you can get out to the people, I think the better, right? I think we should start teaching this in schools. We should start having more. It's like any company, you can have the best cybersecurity program on the planet, but if your users are not spun up on it, then you got a bunch of weak links in the company, which can cause a lot of problems. So the more education, the better. I mean, I don't think we have to dictate it down, but I think people they'll start to get interested in it once they. I think cybersecurity is one of the coolest professions on the planet. So I think I'm all for it.
Well, look at what we got. Jesse Whaley is just putting in a comment here about, if this is all public data, going back kind of to the LinkedIn story, why are we concerned if it's public data? Now, my first thought when I see that is, well, this is what brute forcing is. This is what social engineering is. I can use information from 5 years ago, your last address, the name of your last dog, to get into customer support at Apple or somewhere to wheedle my way through. So what do you think about Jesse's comment? If this is public already, is there a worry?
Jesse does have a good point, but it's also on the companies themselves now for just validation of who you are, and companies need to also bolster their security and their fraud detection and whatnot on public available data can be used. Like you're absolutely right, addresses, phone numbers, and whatnot, and using that as your third party question, that could really get you in some trouble. So I think he has a good point, and I think companies really need to start stepping up their anti-fraud, anti-criminal behavior steps.
It does seem that way. I mean, there's a great reticence, especially amongst the C-suite, for example, to run around saying the sky is falling. But at the same time, this is a permanent condition that we're all very aware of. Mm-hmm. So I'm delighted to see what the Cybersecurity Literacy Act may bring forward, if just
Absolutely.
simply awareness, just increased awareness. You keep delivering this out, maybe it will get picked up as legitimate for a wider range of users in the public. Jesse, thank you very much for your question and your comment, by the way. That's excellent. We really appreciate that. So Windows had a couple of difficult weeks here, but one of the things that's been going around right now is not so much a Microsoft story, but once again a repository story, a GitHub story, that there was what they're calling the print nightmare bug, which was a technical write-up on a fully working proof of concept that was shared on GitHub. And this was focusing on a vulnerability in the Windows print spooler. And it was first of all categorized by Microsoft as a low-importance vulnerability, but they quickly turned around and said this is a remote code execution problem that could be used for exactly that reason, for people to take full control of unpatched Windows systems. It was taken off GitHub very quickly, but not before it was cloned by other users. So this is, again, a thought here, not so much about Microsoft per se, but the amazing use of repositories like GitHub are indisputable, but there does seem to be this kind of weak point in terms of code that is either used or duplicated and replaced. I think they call it confidence hacking, just taking advantage of what's there and using it. So do you have any thoughts about how this particular part of our software development industry could be improved in terms of what we use GitHub and similar for?
I mean, it's more of a moral issue, right? With this story, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe 3 or 4 people found this particular exploit. They came together. They were going to present it at Black Hat or one of those, and somebody accidentally put it up on GitHub, and it stayed there for a few hours, and they pulled it down. Did they notify Microsoft? Did they give them ample amount of time to fix the issues in any type of updates or whatnot? If they did and Microsoft didn't fix their issues, then something like this happens. I mean, who's really at fault, right? Microsoft, I'm sure they're overloaded with bugs and everything else that they have to fix, but there should be some type of hard look at these bugs that get put in, so that if something like this does happen, at least they're ready for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really. Is it really their fault?
No, I don't think anybody would be saying that it was their fault per se. It's just simply the sheer interest in using repositories for code. And I mean, with more and more stuff being used done through open source, it's obviously a crucial part of our food chain. But there just seems to be, like everything else, it becomes abused and it becomes a security leak. So, like all the other things we've been looking at, this is an ongoing evolution. So we'll see what can happen from this. But before we go, it's amazing how quickly our time goes. I got to ask you this because I know you have some insight on this as well. Our last story here is about the state of Maine. We don't hear a lot about Maine, day to day, but they have just passed some very strong facial recognition litigation laws here. Banning the government's use of facial recognition with some exemptions, one being its use by the police who have probable cause about an unidentified person. But there are some tangled rules in here about the police not having access to facial recognition databases, and that would then be done through the FBI and the Maine Bureau of Motor Vehicles. And it also gives Maine citizens the rights to sue if they are improperly targeted by government facial recognition. So it seems like a bit of a messy arrangement, but I understand, again, you've got some global insight about this you can expand upon.
Well, yeah, I just for the last 2 years, I've been working at Dark Matter over in the UAE, and with the Abu Dhabi Smart City and the facial recognition and the different types of recognition technologies that they have in place, you really don't see it. It's not in your face, and you feel pretty safe. That's probably why Dubai is one of the safest countries on the planet. And I understand, in America, privacy is paramount, right? Everybody has the right to their own privacy. Everybody has a right to their own, their own group without anybody impeding on that, and especially government, right? That's what our Constitution and our Bill of Rights are for, right? So, it's hard because I speak about the Middle East where laws are a little different than in America.
Yes.
But I think if you're not, and this is a slippery slope, right? I think if you're not doing anything wrong and you're doing the right thing, for the most part, you don't have to worry about anything. And if you're doing a lot of bad things and a lot of wrong things, then this type of facial recognition and whatnot is probably not a good idea for you.
Right.
So, and then we just come back into Americans wanting their own privacy. They should not have their faces, imprinted somewhere in a government database. But I will let the government speak for themselves on that.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, once again, just seeing these making the headlines, various states are taking these things on, whether it's data protection or facial recognition. They're doing it state by state. It's an interesting new development. But you know what? We have already gone through our 20 minutes. This has been amazing. Your insights, your global knowledge is just really very helpful in providing insight to these stories. I just wanted to, first of all, give everyone watching here your full title and knowledge of your role here at Central Pacific Bank. And I do understand that if people want to connect with you, they can do so at LinkedIn. So while I have this up here, I just want to know, of these stories, was any of these a particular favorite for you, either as a thumbs up or as an eye roller? What of these stories did you enjoy the most?
I'm all for for the education to the consumer about cybersecurity. I think that was the best story here. That's what I like the best. The more we push out, education and knowledge to the regular people, the more that, say, Joe Bag of Donuts knows what he's doing when he buys a new phone or gets on a new website. At least he receives an email from someone that he doesn't know. He can make an educated and a good choice on not opening that $100 million check from certain countries down south,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, this has been absolutely a delight, and we had more time, actually, but I just want to say thank you very much, Gerhard Rickert, for being with us today, VP of Information Security at Central Pacific Bank. This has been an absolute delight, so thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Aloha.
Great. So we are, once again, at the end of another show. And I want to thank our sponsor once again, Kiavi. And also want to remind you that there will be no Friday video chat tomorrow because everyone is going to be enjoying the long weekend. But we do want to invite you to come back on June the 9th for Hacking Secure Cloud Migration, an hour of critical thinking on how to keep pace with businesses' desire to move to the cloud. That'll be next Friday, the 9th of July. And remember also that you can connect with us every weekday in the Cybersecurity Headlines podcast, 6 minutes or thereabouts of the news you need to know about in order to get your day off to a great start. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to wish you a very happy July the 4th when it comes, and for our Canadian viewers, happy Canada Day as well. I'll be back next week. Until then, stay safe. We'll see you then.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.